Up next on the Draft at Pigskin Nut, me and Austin, we're going to talk about our top edge players. And in this year's 2021 draft, you're not hearing edge. Edge is really one of the top positions in terms of having players that can make an impact. But there are a lot of edge players that Austin and I have looked at. Some of them could potentially be sleepers. Up next, we're going to give our top 10 right here on the show. All right, we're here. We're going to talk edge players. Austin, let me ask you this: why are the edge players not getting as much love this year?
I'll be honest, Steve. I think the same reason that a lot of the players this year aren't getting as much love, and that's just because there's so much left to be developed about a lot of them. So many of them, opted out or only have limited experience at the collegiate level. And that really, once again, we've talked about this multiple times when we've done some of these positional breakdowns. Is these guys, there's just a lot more that teams would like to see from them entering the NFL. So you've got softer grades. A lot of these guys had 1 year of production. Some of them not even an impressive year of production. We're still looking at their, talent, level, and just hoping that the raw skills eventually develop to make a star. So that's really what I think, it is with the edge rushers. I mean, there's plenty of top upside. There's plenty of these guys that if they had stayed in school another year, we'd be talking about them as potential top 10 prospects going into next year's draft. But because they didn't stay that extra year, because of that limited experience, I think teams are going to have a hard time taking a risk on some of these guys up in that top 10 to 15 area.
Yeah, absolutely. You could think of your Joe Tryons, your Gregory Russos, guys that have tremendous ability, but they still need to develop. So we're going to look at each of our respective top 10 lists. I think one of the most fascinating things about when looking at people's lists for edge rushers is it's all over the place. You're definitely seeing that a lot of people have varying opinions. I mean, I've seen people that don't even have Gregory Rousseau in their top 10 to 15 edge players. So definitely, I have some guys that I've certainly ranked a lot higher than a lot of other people would, but I'll talk about it. But Austin, we're going to look at your top 10 first. And, you have Azeez Ojulari, number 1. You have Gregory Rousseau, 2. You have Kwity Paye, 3. You have Jalen Phillips, number 4. Jason Owe, 5. Carlos Basham, 6. Joseph Osai, 7. Joe Tryon, 8. Ronnie Perkins, 9. And, Peyton Turner, 10. So, maybe what we can do is, we'll go from 1 to 10 and then, just maybe take, 30 seconds on each of these guys and then talk a little bit about, why you have them ranked there.
Absolutely. We start with Ojulari over at Georgia. And the reason he's the top in this class is just because of the scheme versatility. I think there's going to be a lot of teams that have a role in mind for him, and they may be different. I personally think that him playing a strong side linebacker position in a hybrid scheme where he's the over linebacker that's walked down to the line of scrimmage, not exactly an edge position, but someone that can get involved as an edge player coming off the edge against the pass, but, is more of a take-on player against the run, which I think Ojulari is one of the best take-on players in this class. Yes, he does have the athleticism that makes you think he could be an outstanding edge rusher on passing downs as well as the arm length. My problem is I just don't know, at that 245 to 250 pound range, if playing him consistently on the edge and him consistently taking on tackles is going to be best for his future. Could he bulk up? Sure. I don't want to mess with his athleticism. So, I personally, could you play him as a 3-4 outside linebacker? Absolutely, you could, especially if you put him on the weak side where he's more of a pursuit player and that athleticism could shine. Put him on the strong side where he's constantly taking on a tackle or a double team with the tight end. I have my doubts about that, but in that hybrid scheme where he's not exactly an edge type player, where he's more flexed out 1-by-1 or 2-by-2 off the end man, I think that could be a much better role for him. And yes, he can put his hand on the ground in nickel situations and rush the passer. Russo, is my number two. Um, and I know you're not necessarily as big a fan of Russo as I am, but it's all about
Oh
projecting
no, oh no,
the upside.
that's changed.
Yeah, well, it's all about projecting the upside with Russo, as it is with many of these
Exactly.
guys. The thing about Russo, I will say, um, is that the tape, you see flashes of a really good athlete for someone who's over 6'6.5" Obviously the long arms are there. He sometimes puts it together, although it does comes from the interior a lot, where he actually uses that arm length. But the thing that really impressed me about his workout, that's not getting a lot of talk from everybody else, because they said he had only a lukewarm workout, and in a lot of ways he did. But the 10-yard split of a 157, that is better than Phillips. It's better than Owa. It's better than Pay. That shows that this is a guy that can explode off the line quicker. And there are flashes of that in his 2019 tape. Now, I can easily see why some people would rank him much lower. I've heard one evaluator say, Austin, yes, he had a lot of sack potential or sack production that 2021 or 2019 season, I beg your pardon. But in the same sense, how many of those sacks came from the interior? Is he going to play on the interior in the NFL a ton, rush the passer a ton in the NFL from the interior? I don't see that. Some of it was as a true nose over the center's face, and stuff like that. It's like, guys, he's not going to play that in the NFL. So, I see the flexibility on how to rank Russo, but at the end of the day, I look at the size, I look at that really impressive 10-yard split in his 40, and I say, yes, a guy with that arm length, with that size, that can fire off the football with that kind of explosion, that makes me think of a guy that can really have edge rush success in the NFL. Once again, yes, we're projecting that because we didn't see it but for 1 year at Miami. But, it's there. Kwity Paye, another guy, limited tape. He looked impressive against Indiana this year, and then he gets nicked up, and we don't see him anymore. But the athleticism is there. We knew he was going to put on a show at his pro day. You could see it right there on tape that the athleticism is there, but we've got to refine it. We've got to polish it. This is a guy I wouldn't be shocked if some teams want to stand him up as an outside linebacker, in the 3-4 and play him at that. I really think he could be good in that role as a stand-up outside linebacker. If you want to put him on the ground, as a true edge defensive end, I think he can do that too. He reminds me quite a bit of Brandon Ingram when you talk about, a guy that's got a nice solid build, but yet somebody that's not exactly prototypical height, only around 6'2" or so. So, I do think he can survive standing up or playing though, and that's why I've got him third. Phillips is one of my softer grades in this class as the fourth guy on my list, and that's simply because of the injury history, man. The injury history just scares the crap out of me. This is a guy that left UCLA with the intent of not playing football anymore after a third concussion. Guys, what's the decision he's going to make when the fourth concussion comes? Because every time you have one, you're that much more susceptible to one more whack to the head, and it happens again. So with Phillips, that scares me. He went to Miami to study music and ended up going out and playing for Miami and having an impressive 2020 season. But I don't know. There's a lot of questions, and I don't want to say they're questions about his commitment to football. I believe he really does want to play football, but your health concerns, that's just a whole nother animal. And when you've got concerns in that area, when he's concerned about that area, he's walked away from the sport once. I have to say, if you're an NFL team evaluating him, that's a major, major risk because one shot to the head and in his career, I mean, he could call it quits, or better yet, a doctor could tell him, "Hey, bud, you got to stop this." And then, rounding out my top five, and I'll let you weigh in after this. Jason Owa out of Penn State. I hear people ask me all the time, Austin, do you really think a guy could be drafted in the first round that didn't record a single sack in 2020? And I say, guys, the pressure was there. He does need to get better to finish. He does need to get better with his handwork to be able to get free so he can finish. But my goodness, you look at the tremendous athlete he is. I told one person he reminds me of what Montez Sweat was a year before Montez Sweat came out. Montez Sweat could have come out a year early. He stayed at Mississippi State, ended up having a really good final year there. Went to the Senior Bowl, impressed us even more, and came to the Washington as a more ready player than what he could have been a year prior. I think Jason O was kind of in that boat where he did decide to come out as opposed to staying for the one more year and growing that much more and finally turning potential into production. But I tell you, for defensive coordinators that believe that they've got the magic touch that can coach up and they can refine somebody who's just got extremely elite athletic ability, and it shows up on tape. This isn't a guy where we were shocked that he went out and tested well. It shows up on the tape. It just you got to figure out a way how to finish. They've got to groom him. They've got to coach him. They've got to be a little bit patient with him. I wouldn't be shocked if somebody just drafted him with a specialty pass rusher in mind, somebody that doesn't play a ton in the base and rotates in the nickel at least in his first year. I wouldn't be shocked about that at all. But in the end, if you're patient, boy, the reward could be immensely significant for a franchise if they can just groom him and be patient with him. Steve, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, no, I was on mute for a second. Interesting. I don't really, Owe, I look at someone you have to be patient with, but I also don't really look at him as a big risk either. I honestly, I think Russo is a little bit more risky in some ways, but yeah, I think, because you don't know exactly, are you going to put him over the middle? But, I don't really think of him as Ed Oliver per se, even though Ed Oliver's not really, developed into what he could be yet. But also people wonder is every natural position for him. I have Russo ranked very high. I'll talk about that in a bit. But I think, you have Ojulari number one, you have Russo 2, you have Pay 3, Phillips 4, Owe 5. But I think Owe, I was saying, you can definitely, like you said, you have to be patient with him. But I think he's showing you a lot that he can actually turn into something. Interesting that you have Ojulari ranked that high. Now, do you have him ranked that high because you think that at this point in time, in terms of not having an injury history and showing you that he's done well against quality competition? We can go back to the Alabama game. He had a good game against Leatherwood, who was his assignment that game. Is that why you have Ojulari number one?
I tell you, I have Ojulari ranked that high because of that linebacker position I talked about, and I think he could play Sam in a 4-3. I think he could play, like I say, on the weak side in a 3-4, where his size and having to take on a tackle or a double team quite as much won't be quite, it won't be as often. It won't be as much in the trenches and constantly, getting that 245, 250 pound frame beat up. But I'll say this too. There's something that Ojulari shows that a lot of these guys, I can't necessarily say it for because there's just limited tape and they haven't proven it on a consistent basis. God, Ojulari's motor never stops. And this is a guy that you see his desire to succeed. And that in itself, boosts him above a number of guys on this list simply because whatever task you throw his way, hey, bud, we want you to play Sam linebacker. We want you to play a hybrid position. We want you to play an outside linebacker in a 3-4 or a defensive end in the nickel, whatever it may be. You are going to get his best, his best effort, and he's got the skill sets to succeed in a lot of different ways. That's why I've got him up higher. There's going to be some teams that don't have Russo or Phillips or maybe even Owa that high on their board simply because of the question marks.
Yeah, and I think, the other thing we talk about, a lot of variances in terms of how you grade, how I'll grade, how other, scouts in the media will grade, is that I think we're also grading a lot on different criteria. I think, my top 10, my top 15, actually, a lot of it's really based on just how I see them, translating, as an edge, where some people, like, for example, when I go into, I don't have Kwity Paye ranked in my top 3. But that doesn't mean he's not one of the top 3 best football players that's on that list. But I think when we look at edge assignments, there's different thought processes there. And yours with Ojulari is that he can do a lot of different things. And in an NFL today that values versatility, that's important. So again, for those that are listening to podcast form that can't see all this, Austin has Azeez Ojulari number 1. Gregory Rousseau, number 2, Kwity Paye, number 3, Jalen Phillips, number 4, Jason Owe, number 5. He has Carlos Basham Jr. at number 6. He has Joseph Osai at number 7. At 8, he has Joe Tryon. At 9, he has Ronnie Perkins. At 10, he has Peyton Turner. And although we won't have time to go through film on go through analysis on each of these guys, Austin, of these guys that I mentioned, 6 through 10, who do you think there, has the best chance at really being an impactful player at the edge position at the next level?
Well, Joe Tryon from Washington has the potential that a lot of the Russos, the Payes, the Phillips, the Owas, he's right there. He's not far off from what they have.
Oh yeah,
wise.
He just has to use his hands better.
Absolutely. I mean, there once again, there's going to have to be a lot of grooming there. I think he's a little stiffer than some of these guys are. I don't know if he's got quite that ability to bend the edge like some of these others. But I also think that he's probably going to be more of a 3-4 stand-up outside linebacker as opposed to somebody who's got to shoot out low from the edge position and really stay low to turn that corner. An outside linebacker in a 3-4. The stiffness, it's not quite as much of an issue because you're coming at a little bit different of an angle from the stand-up position, from a little bit wider form. So I definitely think Tryon has the potential to be as good as any of them. One guy I will say,
and I was going to say, real quick, that characterizes your statement from before, and your statement from before, was that, I asked you, why are these guys not ranked higher? And it's just they haven't had a chance to develop. And Joe Tryon's a guy that he has the ability. So if we saw him make a big leap this year, we could have been talking about him as a top 15 to 20 pick. And who knows, maybe we don't know how a team is going to value him. We're not saying that can happen. That can't happen, but I think the likelihood is certainly less. And I think, when you look at that statement and that whole theme of this year's edge class, he's a prime example of that.
Rousseau and Tryon don't opt out. There's a strong chance that they're 1 and 2 on this board, assuming that they showed the development that they'd shown in prior years. There's a good chance they're 1 and 2 on this board. Definitely top 5, both of them. I'll say this. Carlos Basham, who I've got at 6 out of Wake Forest, he is a guy who stayed. He is a guy that continued to show further and further development. Went to the Senior Bowl, was one of the best players there while he was participating until he eventually bowed out just because he got a little nicked up. But Carlos Basham is as a matter of fact, I'm not even going to say one of them. He is the safest player in this entire bunch, and now I don't necessarily expect him to make his living on the edge. This is a guy who's going to play a 5 tech in a 3-4 scheme or as a defensive end, or he's going to play a 4 tech in a hybrid scheme as an interior shaded end. Yes, he can on nickel downs. He can step out and rush the passer off the edge. He can also rush from the interior. Peyton Turner is a very similar prospect, and even a guy who I've got ranked number 11 that just missed my top 10. Milton Williams is another guy that plays that same type of role. These guys aren't necessarily what you would call edge players. They will play some on the edge in nickel downs, but their base is going to be more of an interior shaded guy. But Carlos Basham has done it. He's done it at Wake Forest year in, year out. The motor is tremendous. The strength and the athleticism combination is outstanding. I could see Carlos Basham slipping into the end of the first round. Matter of fact, my last mock draft I put out, I had him going to Tampa Bay at 32. As somebody who could eventually, replace Ndamukong Suh at one end position, or even compete to start across from him at the other end position in that 3-4. A very, very polished player, a very explosive, strong, athletic player. He's somebody that could really, do some things right away. He might be the one that has the best impact right from the get-go of this bunch. And then, you just look at some of the versatility from some of the others. Joseph Asai, a lot like Azeez Ojulari, a guy that's probably a strong sign player in a 4-3 or a hybrid. Probably shouldn't play on the edge every down because of size, and especially in his case, the arm length. But the motor's tremendous. Good take-on guy. He's another guy, that he's going to fit on a lot of different boards and a lot of different ways. Some will have him as a linebacker. Some will have him as an edge. Some people will have him as maybe a hybrid player. So, just a lot of versatility in this group. And overall, who knows who's going to be the top 1, 2, or 3 years down the line. That's the biggest issue with a lot of these guys is there's just not a track record of a proven path of development like we've seen in past years with a guy like Chase Young, like we've seen with the Bosa brothers and people like that. We saw development year after year after year, and then the NFL came, and we just don't have that path with very many of them.
Yeah, no, one of the many unfortunate things about COVID-19, probably for us, we're like that's the worst thing. What do you mean? But anyways, good thing we don't have network executives, and it's a good thing that it's now my turn because I am excited to share mine. So again, for those that are in podcast form, Austin has Azeez Ojulari number 1, Gregory Rousseau 2, Kwity Paye 3, Jalen Phillips 4, Jason Owe 5, Carlos Basham 6, Joseph Osai 7, Joe Tryon 8, Ronnie Perkins 9, Peyton Turner 10, and now here is my top 10. So it's a little bit different. And my grading criteria is based on it's a combination of what I saw on the tape, and also what I think they can be at the next level, and also like if you see here, like I have Kwity Paye at number 5. I think he's probably the second best football player on this list behind Jalen Phillips. But what I'll talk about is what he does in the run game is not the same as what he does in the pass game right now. And I think he can maybe develop into that, but I also have to take that into consideration. So looking at my top guys here, the reason that I have Jalen Phillips number 1 is, I'll say this, I think he's the best football player of these guys. And I think there's a pretty significant gap. I would say, on film, I don't really see anyone that's really a lot more proficient than him in terms of consistently defeating blocks against quality competition. And, you're going to see he's technically sound, he's great against the run and the pass, and he puts in, regardless of what we can say about, wanting to leave football, there's nobody that puts in more effort on a down in and down out basis. Now, I think, based on his playing style and based on what we've seen in the past, is there potential for injury in the future? Yes. But, and again, that's different grading criteria. I'm just looking based on, what I've seen on the film. And what I see on the film is a guy that plays with great pad level diagnosis well. I'd say that, on this list, this is a list with some good athletes, but he's still one of the very best ones on this list. And I think, there's enough tape of him that you can see that, in my opinion, he's worth a top 15 pick. He does remind me a bit of the way he plays. I certainly won't compare him to that because we're talking about one of the best defensive ends ever. But, he does remind me of some of what he does, similar to J.J. Watt. And I would say that that's based on, some of his size, the way he's tested, how he defeats blocks, and he just, flows to the football really well. Gregory Rousseau is a guy that I have at number 2. And, Austin, we were talking initially, you admitted, I was very down on Gregory Rousseau, and I'll admit I didn't like his tape at first. What I saw initially was a big guy that was lumbering, that would, get stalemated, that when he was winning with his length. with his length. And that's the thing, is that you have to watch a considerable amount of tape to start to see things. And I would say that as I watched, more and more tape, I started to see some of that dominance, and I started to see it a lot. And, and anyone who's saying that he did nothing more to get easy sacks, and that's where stats came from, I'm going to say that that's wrong. There's a lot of domination, and I'll say, and I even have a friend who, friend of mine, he was at the first ever practice at Miami that Russo was at, and he said he destroyed the offensive line so bad it basically shut down the practice. So look, outside of the sacks, he had 19 and a half tackles for loss, and let's just remember that he did this when he was 19-year-old. Yes, he's raw, but I think he does dominate a lot more than what he gets credit for. You are already seeing, yes, he's raw, but you are seeing the signs that he can start to use some of these tools. He's using these tools well. And for a guy with long arms, he benched 225 a lot of times. He wins with, a lot of power. We've seen him, be great from the middle of the defense. So you can line him up and down the defense. And look, length does matter. No joke intended there. But in the NFL sense, we're talking about edge rushers and guys' arms, length does matter. And I also like him in the interviews. I think he's honest about, where he needs to be. And I think he seems like a guy that likes football. Definitely one of the biggest surprises on my list to a lot of people that would see this is going to be ranking Ronnie Perkins 3. Haven't seen anyone else that'll rank him that high. And I'll tell you why I did after I get a little water here. But look, outside of Jalen Phillips, I don't see anyone who I think did a better job of routinely defeating blocks. And I'm talking about what I've seen him do against both the run and the pass. There's a lot of guys in this class where, they're really good as edge defenders, but you don't see a lot of good stuff in terms of the run game. Certainly Kwity Paye, Jalen Phillips, but also Ronnie Perkins as well. And the thing with Perkins is that he doesn't have the highest ceiling, certainly, of these guys. Probably one of the lower ceilings in terms of guys I'm talking about. But here's what he does have. He has a huge arsenal of pass rush moves. He has counter moves. He's a good run defender. And then, what you'll see is that when he plays, and you can turn on his film from the last couple seasons, and you'll see that he's explosive, he's violent, and, he has good lower body flexibility. He has a good first step. His arms are, about 33 inches long. So, I mean, it's not tremendous. But the thing that he has is that he does use his length very well. He has, again, you don't see him get stuck on blocks as much as a lot of these other guys do. And, look, and I'll say this too, when he ended his 2020 season, although he only played 6 games, he was averaging a sack a game, and the tape was pretty consistent. Tape in the Cotton Bowl was really good against Florida, so like that. Peyton Turner, I have at number 4. Peyton Turner is a guy that has a lot of scary upside, and I'll say he has a lot of the same scary upside that we see in Gregory Rousseau. Peyton Turner tested better in some aspects. I think he jumped higher, and I think his 40 was faster. But and I'll say this: I wouldn't be shocked if Peyton Turner ends up being the cream of the crop of this edge class when we look back in 5 years from now. Because to me, I think he's getting probably devalued as that. Look, he's playing at Houston. The level of competition there is not the same standard. But the tape shows a player that's really coming into his own. He's raw, but he's got length, he's got speed, he's got power. He's really difficult to deal with, and I think you're seeing that blockers, once he defeats them, they have a hard time recovering against him. And I think in terms of just the way everything he has a lot of potential there, and I'll say close to the same level as Gregory Rousseau. I have him ranked one spot behind Ronnie Perkins, although I think his ceiling is higher. But I think, when you look at Ronnie Perkins as being a complete player, he's beyond him, right now. Kwity Paye, I have ranked number 5. I would say he's the second best football player on this list because, and I'd have no problem if someone drafted him, late in the first round. I wouldn't draft him top 15, or I wouldn't probably draft him top 20. Maybe like between 20 to 30 would be an okay spot for me. But I have him ranked at 5 because Although I think he's the second best football player on this list, I think he's pretty far from being the second best pass rusher. And I'm not even sure if he's a top 5 pass rusher at this point. But here's what I'll say is that in terms of, this NFL being about developing players that are coming out of college, there's a lot to like. He tested well. He's explosive. He's twitched up. He fires off the snap. He plays with probably better pad level than anyone in this class.
Absolutely.
And I mean, low man wins in football, and I mean, there's nobody in this list that plays with the kind of leverage that he does. But he can bend well. He got change of direction, ability. So look, I mean, he can do a lot. And then when we talk about being the second best football player in this list, but the 5th best edge rusher, that's why we're saying that, everyone's grading criteria is different. But I think, when you look at what he can be as an edge rusher, I think he can definitely turn into one. But as a football player, he's great against the run. You could line him up at different spots along the line. He's a great locker room guy, which, I think we talked about the Giants wanting him, and, that would be a reason why. But I think, when you look at his pass rush ability, it's still somewhat of a projection. So I have to, have to take a step back there. So that's my top 5 there. What do you got for me, Austin? Any thoughts there?
Kwity Paye, you talked about him being a great locker room guy, a terrific backstory to Paye, and just, his upbringing. I'm a big fan of Kwity Paye. I was, matter of fact, an associate of ours over at the site, Patrick Chiotti, I think I told him back maybe November or so when, or December, when I knew we knew we're kind of getting an idea of where teams were drafting, and me being a Cowboy fan, kind of not really knowing who was going to be the top defender in this class, because there were so many good offensive prospects, and we knew Dallas was going to be picking high, and you knew that Micah Parsons was great, but also Cowboys already kind of had some players set in at linebacker. I remember asking Patrick, I said, man, I wouldn't. I say, do you think it's a stretch here for me to think that Paye could possibly go this high? I said, I know he's going to test well. And the tape is limited, and yeah, he's raw, and he's got to get better, more consistent technique, and he's got to obviously expand his arsenal when it comes to getting to the passer. I said, but man, he's just a good football player. It seems like it's all there, that he's on the way to doing it. And Patrick, he kind of agreed with me. He's like, yeah, I can see what you're saying. I think that's, him being a top 10 pick would be a little rich for my blood. And the same it is for me. But 2 years down the line, we might be talking about him as one of the best defenders to come out of this class. You talk about Peyton Turner. I'll say this too: the biggest difference between Russo and Turner, I look at Russo and you see a man that's ready to play NFL physically right now. You look at his torso; he's put on the type of weight he needs to be an NFL defensive end.
Yeah, Peyton needs to eat. He needs to eat a little bit more. I'll agree, but he is powerful as he is now.
Well, that's the thing though. I look at Turner. Turner weighed more than Russo does. Turner weighs 270.
Did he? Okay.
But here's my thing. You look at him and it's like, bud, there's room. There's room for you to add more. You could get stronger. And I mean, he's already a strong guy, 35-inch arms. He puts up 23 reps on the bench. I mean, that's very impressive. He's a strong player, but I could see him playing in the low 280s. And that's why I grade him best as a 5 tech or a 4 tech in a 3-4 scheme or a hybrid scheme where he's shaded on the interior, a position that obviously guys like J.J. Watt and Calais Campbell have had so much success playing in their careers. That's really where I see his best future because of that. I really think somebody's going to get a hold of him. They're going to get him in a weight program, and this guy's going to continue to get bigger, stronger, and we're going to see a guy that just really comes into his own. And Houston did that with him. They moved him to different alignments in their defensive front. So he's already got a bit of a taste of it, and I think the best football from and that I can say that about a lot of these guys, but for Peyton Turner, I think, hey, physically, he's not where he can be yet. He's a physical player, but he's not where he can be. Look at Kwity Paye. physically, we know what Kwity Paye is going to be in the NFL. We've seen it. Gregory Rousseau, the same. Jalen Phillips, the same. And you could just go on down the line. Ronnie Perkins, Ojulari, Tryon. A lot of these guys physically are ready to. Their bodies are where they need to be, and are as good as they're going to get. No point in slimming them down or adding weight to most of them. Whereas Peyton Turner, of the bunch that we've both got in our top 10, he's the one that you say, wow, physically he can still develop so much more. He can add more to his frame, and then, my goodness, we might have a monster on our hands.
Yeah. No, fair, fair point. I mean, I think the other concern there for people having Turner low, obviously, I go by what I see on film is that, I mean, look, he played in Houston. The competition there, is not, is not great. But, I'm rounding out like the rest of this top 10. So I have Azeez, and I'm going to go through these ones a little bit faster. But, I have Azeez Ojulari at 6, and I would say, for Azeez, there's, you do want to see guys that do well against good competition. I thought he did a pretty good job in that Alabama game. Mostly was going against Alex Leatherwood. But I think he's somewhat inconsistent. And I think, a lot of this really stems from him needing more pass moves. And I'll say this, I think, he can shed blocks. He can win with finesse and power. And I would say he's coachable because even though his arsenal is very limited, the limited stuff that he has, he does really well. So I'm of the opinion that he can still, develop into something better than that. Joe Tryon, I have at 7, like Peyton Turner and Gregory Rousseau, he has good gifts, to work with, different, I think he's certainly more explosive than, probably a little more explosive than Peyton Turner, and more so than Gregory Rousseau. But, I think he ran a 4.5. Of course, it's a laser timer, but, I think a case can be made that, overall, you could put him in the conversation as the best physical gifts to work with. So, it does pain me to put him at 7, but look, he's so raw, but he's long, he's athletic, he does have violent hands. He probably closes as fast as anyone outside of Jason Owe. Peyton Turner closes really fast on you too. But look, that's why I have him there. He's raw, a lot left on the table. He didn't have a season this last year. I have Jason Owe at 8. Jason Owe, straight line speed, the fastest guy in this class. Raw, yes, but I think if you draft him on day 2, anywhere, I don't really think it's that much of a risk because I think, his physical tools are such that he's going to be able to help your organization. And I think with him being a great mover, and also he has a lot of good film and he is disruptive. There's a lot of tape of him being disruptive, but there's also a lot of tape of him, getting stuck on blocks and having trouble finishing. And, the number of games where he doesn't time the snap count as well as he could, but I think it's on a risk because, I don't think he's boom or bust in the way people think. I just think he needs time. That's all it is. Rashad Weaver, I have at 9. Rashad Weaver from Pitt. I think Weaver, he's a very natural pass rusher. If you look at the way he bends, great arm length, he's got some power and explosion to his game. Does a great job using his arms to get off blocks. He's built to be a pass rusher. And another guy that can develop there. I think, in terms of why I have Rashad Weaver 9 with that glowing recommendation is because I think, physically speaking, just in terms of athleticism, Jason Owe has a bit more to work with. Joe Tryon has a bit more to work with. Weaver's not exactly, he's a good player, but he still has some work to do. But look, I won't be surprised if Rashad Weaver, I'm saying this now, I won't be surprised if he ends up being top 3 or 4 out of this class. Look, this is it's hard to project because, because a lot of these guys, like we said, they're raw. There's a lot left on the table. You don't know what team they're going to, how they're going to use them, where they're going to line them up, what their mentality is going to be like there. So, a lot of it's going to have some discrepancy. And then I have Joseph Osai from Texas at 10. There's a lot I like about Osai. He moves great, but here's the thing. He's not a true edge rusher yet. You saw him in 2019. He was in a more traditional linebacker role. But, when you look at what he does well, he's a very natural mover. He's always around the football. and he just needs some time if he's going to be a reliable starter in the NFL. Look, I think he's going to be a starter one way or the other. You just don't know whether they're going to line him up at edge or they're going to put him back to more traditional linebacker spot. So that's going to round up our entire list for today. Thank you guys for joining us. Next time we'll be talking some offensive linemen, but these are our top 10 edge rushers right here at the draft at Pigskin Nut. And again, for those on podcast form, I'm going to give my top 10 again just because I know you guys can't see it. I have myself, Steve. I have Jalen Phillips ranked number 1, Gregory Rousseau number 2, Ronnie Perkins 3, Peyton Turner 4, Kwity Paye 5, Azeez Ojulari 6, Joe Tryon number 7, Jason Owe number 8, Rashad Weaver 9, and Joseph Asai 10. The NFL draft is coming up pretty soon, but we're not going to stop talking about it. That's what we do year round here at the draft at Pigskin Nut. Until